All right, yesterday I posted a video unboxing this new Spyderco Ayoob in a plain edge, and got another box in the mail today, which I'm pretty confident is the same knife, but in serrated edge. Knife Center. So let's have a look. Okay. Guess they ran out of peanuts. It's interesting. Yeah, the box is a little different. Well, for one thing, this box is a little bit smushed, which is unfortunate for a collectible. But well, I guess just so you don't mix them up, they've got a plain edge and a serrated edge with different color stickers on the box. All right, well, let's see how it is besides the slightly crushed box. Yeah. All right, so since I already talked a little bit about the plain edge version of this knife yesterday, I'm going to be a little bit brief in my discussion of the serrated version, which Spyderco calls a Spyderedge, right? The main thing that I want to point out is that this is a big knife. You know, it might not be evident when you're just looking at photos of it, but as I said yesterday, if you compare this to a buck 110, which is a pretty big pocket knife, you see that it's even larger. And one of Spyderco's longest blades on a folding knife is on the police, which is, yeah, just a little bit longer than this Massad Ayoob, but it doesn't have as much belly. So I think the linear edge on the Ayoob is probably a little bit longer, even though the length down the center of the blade from handle to tip is shorter. If you were to measure along the edge and follow all those curves of the serrations and then also the belly, I expect you'd get a little bit longer total on the Ayoob even than the serrated police, which is a little over 4 inches long. Another thing that occurred to me as I was looking at this model of knife, especially folded, is that it reminded me a little bit of another Spyderco model from approximately the same era, right around 2000, 2001. This is the Spyderco Wegner Jr. Okay. Obviously smaller. But everything kind of scales. Even the tiny hole on this thing kind of scales with the size of the knife up to this Ayoob. Now, of course, it doesn't have the negative blade angle. that the Ayoob has. So it's, you know, and it's a drop point, whereas this is a clip point, or even a trailing point. It would be a trailing point if the blade was on the same axis as the handle. But kind of the, you know, shape of the handle, and especially the way it looks folded up just reminded me of another Spyderco from a different designer, but from that same period. And so even though this is a Wegner and this is an Ayoob, that, you know, I guess Sal Glazer influence and the sort of company design aesthetic is I think pretty evident in these designs from the same era. All right, well, there's a little look at the Massad Ayoob in CruWear, CPM CruWear steel from Crucible here in the United States. The knife is manufactured in Japan from American Steel. This is Seki City design, Seki City production, Spyderco. Spyderco, of course, has production facilities in Golden, Colorado, Seki City, Japan, Taichung, Taiwan, and they produce some stuff in China as well, and also in Maggiano, Italy, often in partnership with Lion Steel. And I showed yesterday the comparison between this and another negative angle Spyderco. This is the Kukri from Ed Schemp. It has sort of a similar blade angle on it. And, you know, these Ayoob knives are really intended to be weapons, right? I mean, Massad Ayoob is a martial artist and a firearms instructor and a law enforcement officer, and that's sort of where he's coming from in terms of the intended use of the knife. The Ed Schemp Kukri, even though it's got a similar shape, I don't think is really quite as much of a weapon. You know, that leaf-shaped blade design is not really intended for piercing so much. It's a good slicer, and this was my everyday carry knife for years, and I really like this design. I found it really great for draw cuts and push cuts. You know, it's a very ergonomic design. It had a few different grips that were comfortable. You could either get a lot of reach or you could choke up on it for more fine control. And then the blade, I mean, it's VG10 and it's, you know, sort of that familiar full flat grind Spyderco, you know, super slicey, you know, kind of Delica and Dura territory. And I liked it quite a bit. I still like it. One thing about the Ayoob that I noticed is that it has teeny tiny hardware. I'm pretty sure that that is the same hardware that's in this Schemp Kukri, which is T5 on those handle scale. Let's check that. Maybe. Obligatory Torx bits here. Yeah, T5, right? Yeah, T5. And let's see if that's, yeah, that's what we're dealing with on the Ayoob. Not ideal. In fact, this kukri with this T5 hardware has just a little wiggle around one of these standoffs in the back. And these screws don't go directly into those standoffs. So in order to tighten up the screws that are in the standoffs, you need to take the scale off to get to the screws that are actually the problem here to tighten up. But I can't take that off because it's getting a little bit stripped. And I took this knife with me this summer when I went to Golden, Colorado, and visited the Spyderco facility there, and brought it in for service, and left it with them, and they mailed it back to me. And there was, there's only enough room on their form to real briefly describe the issue that I was dropping it off for. And I said, it's got a wiggle in there, and I think they maybe tightened the the pivot. Certainly is, the lockup is good. I don't know if it's any different than it was when I dropped it off. And they certainly sharpened it. I can tell that they sharpened it. But they didn't fix this little wiggle back here. Probably because I didn't notice it and didn't give me enough room on the form to explain adequately what the problem was. Even though I showed it to the guy at the counter there in their outlet store when I dropped it off, and he understood, but something got lost in translation by the time it got to the warranty service guys and gals. Anyway, it's not a huge deal, but yeah, those tiny screws, that's the way they were doing it back then, and I guess they've been faithful to the original design. And I'm assuming that the 2001 Massad Ayoob must have also had these little T5 screws, or I don't know why else they would use them, because they are a pain in the butt. And if you compare it to like a Paramilitary 2 or something that has T8 hardware, much easier to service and take apart if you need to. Of course, it's under warranty, so theoretically you shouldn't have to. You could send it into them, but it doesn't always work out, right? So that's a bit of a frustration, but it's such a simple knife design. It's a lock back, I don't think it'll be an issue. I mean, you got something like this police here, it doesn't have any exposed screws. It's all pinned construction, right? You can see here some of those. There's a pin, right? It's polished flat with the handle scale. And this is an old knife, and it's still working fine. It's a pretty simple lockback design, so it's not a whole lot that can go wrong with it. The Ayoob has that going for it. There's no, it's got a back spacer. It doesn't have standoffs like that Shimp kukri to get loose, so probably won't be an issue. These, of course, are made with CPM CruWear. It's a great steel, easy to sharpen relatively. It's particle metallurgy, so it's consistent grain structure. Not stainless, but holds an edge well and is tough. It's not gonna chip very easily. And those serrations, I would expect this knife to still have a pretty wicked, efficient cutting edge for quite a while without any maintenance. Of course, I'm not going to be using this one. I'm not a ninja. I'm not a tactical guy. I'm a collector, so this will probably just be something to go in my collection. But I could imagine using the plain edge one I don't know if I will. I haven't decided yet, but I could imagine carrying this and using it, you know, not for tactical purposes, unless, you know, I was in a really unexpected circumstance and that was what it came down to. But just as an EDC knife, it'd be okay for that, right? The spine of this stays thick out pretty close to the end. I mean, if you compare it to, look at like a Delica or something, which is, okay, maybe that's not a fair comparison because a Delica is awfully thin. But even compared to, let's see, what can I show you to compare this to here that's handy? Here's a pair 3. Okay. Quite a bit thicker at the tip than the pair 3. So, you know, that is consistent with the design philosophy here of a knife that's meant for piercing, right? Stabbing into things without breaking the tip off. So, you know, could be good for, and, you know, besides tactical purposes, I guess, you know, if you have cutting tasks that involve piercing, and you don't want to break your knife, could be good for that. It is saber ground, flat grind. I thought it was hollow grind, but it's flat. You know, but it's not the full flat grind or even a high flat grind that you would find on a lot of other Spyderco knives. So it's not going to be as much of a slicer, but it would do fine cutting packages or rope, things like that. And CruWear is a great steel. So, you know, I think it has applications other than tactical. The serrated, you know, I mean, serrations in general are not my favorite feature on a knife. Of course, you know, you see them on things like steak knives because they're good at cutting meat, which gruesomely I think is kind of why these tactical knives often do have a full serrated edge. Of course, it's also good for fibrous things like rope. You know, maybe there would be somebody out there who would use this as an EDC, and other than for self-defense. But I think if I end up carrying one of them, it'll be the plain edge. But yeah, cool knives. They come configured for tip down carry, but they do have the tapped holes to swap that pocket clip around to tip up carry, and, you know, left or right side, as opposed to this Wegner. This is a one position, right? Tip up, right side carry. You know, I meant to also point out what might be an obvious similarity, you know, when we're looking at these self-defense blades with a negative, self-defense knives with a negative blade angle. You know, I think one of the things that'll come to mind for a lot of people is the TDI design from Ka-Bar. This one's the goofy United States Space Force model, right? So Ka-Bar makes, you know, versions of their knives for the different armed services. There's a Marine version, there's an Army version, there's a Navy version. This, you know, they recently came out with a line of products, including their big, you know, Mark II fighting knife, and one of their TDIs and a couple of other things, and in this color scheme and with sort of like NASA, old NASA logo kind of lettering. It's mostly a joke. you know, I don't think they have a contract with the Space Force to provide them with equipment or anything, but you know, it's just it's a little silly to think about somebody. I mean, if you're in space, you know, what are you going to be using your tactical knife for? You know, fighting aliens or something. Pretty silly. But anyway, this knife is designed so that, you know, it's pretty intuitive if you're going to use it for self-defense, that, you know, when you hold it in this position, you know, the blade is pointing straight for thrust. And that's the same concept basically as these Ayoob knives, which some people will probably be mad that I even compared the two, because this is kind of a pretty different category of knife from a collector standpoint. The Ayoob is much nicer, but hard to deny that they have a similar shape, and I'm sure that similarity will be front of mind for some people looking at it. All right, well, that's my look at the serrated Spyderco Massad Ayoob. It's a sprint run. They're sold out in you know, first day that they were released, I believe. But this is the sprint run in gray G10 and CruWear. Thanks.